The man who will lead Bangladesh's new caretaker government has returned to Dhaka. Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus flying into the capital from Paris.
Muhammad Yunus has been named as the head of the country's interim government.
With all the chaos that is going on in Bangladesh, it looks like the government has finally appointed someone who seems to have the ability to dig them out of their current hole. After all, he has a strong background in microfinancing, which is an industry currently worth over $230 billion and is expected to hit a valuation of $650 billion by the year 2033. However, there are some deep, dark secrets behind the selection of Muhammad Yunus, and it's important to understand how he managed to leverage politics in order to escape his controversies. On that note, let's learn the truth behind the man who has now taken the head of Bangladesh's interim government. Chapter 1: Born for Glory. Muhammad Yunus was born on 28 June 1940 to a Bengali in the Chittagong district of the Bengal Presidency, which is now in Bangladesh. He was the third of 9 children birthed by his father, a jeweler, and his mother, a housewife. After his graduation, Yunus joined the Bureau of Economics as a research assistant to the economics researches of Nurul Islam and Rehman Saban. After that, he was appointed as a lecturer in economics in Chittagong College in 1961. During that time, he also set up a profitable packaging factory as a side business, which was quite admirable for a man in the profession of education. In 1965, he received a Fulbright scholarship to study in the United States and obtained his PhD in economics from the Vanderbilt University Graduate Program in Economic Development. From 1969 to 1972, Yunus was an assistant professor of economics at Middle Tennessee State University in Murfreesboro. Clearly, this man had a strong aptitude for finance, and this was just the beginning of his rise towards glory. During the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971, Yunus founded a citizens committee and ran the Bangladesh Information Center with other Bangladeshis in the United States to raise support for liberation. He also published the Bangladesh newsletter from his home in Nashville. After the war, he returned to Bangladesh and was appointed to the government's planning commission headed by Nurul Islam. However, he found the job boring and resigned after some time. After observing the famine of 1974, he became involved in poverty reduction and established a rural economic program as a research project. In 1975, Yunus developed a new era 3-share farm which the government adopted as the Packaged Input Program. In order to make the project more effective, Yunus and his associates got the central government to form 440,392 village governments as a 4th layer of supervision in 2003. However, in response to a petition by Bangladesh Legal Aid and Services Trust, also known as BLAST, the High Court declared village governments illegal and unconstitutional. Regardless, Yunus's concept of microcredit for supporting innovators in multiple developing countries also inspired programs such as the Info Ladies Social Entrepreneurship Program. Chapter 2: Grameen Bank. Before we understand Yunus's proficiency, let's quickly understand what microfinance is. As per Investopedia, microfinance, also called microcredit, is a type of banking service provided to low-income individuals or groups who otherwise wouldn't have access to financial services. While institutions participating in microfinance most often provide lending microloans can range from as small as $50 to under $50,000. The goal of microfinance is to ultimately allow impoverished people to become self-sufficient. Now, let's get back to how Yunus was able to propel this concept in his country. In 1976, during visits to the poorest households in the village of Jubra near Chittagong University, Yunus discovered that very small loans could make a disproportionate difference to a poor person. Village women who made bamboo furniture had to take usurious loans to buy bamboo and repay their profits to the lenders. Traditional banks did not want to make tiny loans at reasonable interest to the poor due to the high risks of defaulting payments. Despite this, Yunus believed that, given the chance, the poor will not need to pay high interest rates on the money and can keep any profits from their own labor. Hence, microcredit became a viable business model. Yunus lent $27 of his money to 42 women in the village, who made a profit of 2 cents each on the loan. This may sound like a small sum, but it led Yunus to be credited with the idea of microcredit. In December of that same year, Yunus finally secured a loan from the government Janata Bank to lend to the poor in Jobra. The institution continued to operate, securing loans from other banks for its projects. In as little as 6 years, it had reached 28,000 members. On 1 October 1983, Yunus's pilot project began operation as a full-fledged bank for poor Bangladeshis and was renamed Grameen Bank, which translates to Village Bank. By July 2007, Grameen Bank had issued around $6.38 billion to 7.4 million borrowers. To ensure repayment of loans, the bank uses a system known as solidarity groups. These small informal groups apply together for loans, and its members members act as co-guarantors of repayment in order to ensure nobody defaults. In the late 1980s, Grameen started to diversify by attending to underutilized fishing ponds and irrigation pumps like deep tube wells. In 1989, these diversified interests started growing into separate organizations. In time, the Grameen initiative grew into a multifaceted group of profitable and non-profit ventures, including major projects like Grameen Trust and Grameen Fund, which runs equity projects like Grameen Software Limited, Grameen Cybernet Limited, Grameen Knitwear Limited, Grameen Kitwear Limited, as well as Grameen Telecom, which has a stake in Grameenphone aka GP, the biggest private phone company in Bangladesh. From its start in March 1997 to 2007, GP's Village Phone project had brought cell phone ownership to 260,000 rural people in over 50,000 villages. The success of the Grameen microfinance model inspired similar efforts in about 100 developing countries, and even in developed countries including the United States. Many microcredit projects retain Grameen's emphasis of lending to women. More than 94% of Grameen loans have gone to women, who suffer disproportionately from poverty and who are more likely than men to devote their earnings to their families. For his work with Grameen, Yunus was named an Ashoka Innovators for the Public Global Academy member in 2001. He also found a lot of praise in economic books that praise the business and finance models of Grameen Bank. As a matter of fact, Yunus was awarded the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize, along with Grameen Bank, for their efforts to create economic and social development. However, all that glitters is not gold, and in the case of Muhammad Yunus, he was far from the ideal role model. Chapter 3: Shady Dealings. It is but obvious that a man as successful as Yunus would be constantly monitored by the government, and this led to some rather unpleasant discoveries. The second Hasina Ministry announced a review of Grameen Bank's activities on 11th January 2011. By February, though, a lot of international leaders, such as Mary Robinson, stepped up their defense of Yunus through a number of efforts, including the founding of a formal network of supporters known as Friends of Grameen. Despite this, the Finance Minister of Bangladesh, Abul Mal Abdul Muhith, declared that Yunus should stay away from Grameen Bank while it is being investigated. After that, on the 2nd of March 2011, Muzammil Haq, a former bank employee whom the government had appointed chairman in January, announced that Yunus had been fired as managing director of the bank. This was followed soon after by bank general manager Janet E. Quanan, who issued a statement that Yunus was continuing in his office, pending review of the legal issues surrounding the controversy. Of course, Yunus was not going to remain silent, and he petitioned the Bangladesh High Court, challenging the legality of the decision by the Bangladeshi Central Bank to remove him as managing director of Grameen Bank. The same day, 9 elected directors of Grameen Bank filed a second petition. U.S. Senator John Kerry expressed his support to Yunus in a statement on 5 March 2011 and declared that he was deeply concerned by this unprecedented situation. The same day in Bangladesh, thousands of people protested and formed human chains to support Yunus. After all, they had him to thank for his financial support. The High Court hearing on the petitions was planned for 6 March 2011 but got postponed for unclear reasons. Eventually, just 2 days after that, the court confirmed Yunus's dismissal, thus landing further scrutiny on him. But what were these accusations that led such a respected figure to dismissal from his position? Chapter 4: Loan Shark Accusations. The allegations against Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank were made in a context wherein some people began to question the effectiveness of microfinance. This was prompted by the actions of some for-profit microfinance institutions in India and Mexico. Coercion, peer pressure, and physical harassment were reportedly used as loan repayment practices in some specific microfinance institutions. Essentially, the term just became a buzzword for loan sharks to continue their reign without consequence. The mass commercialization of microcredit prompted Yunus to state, and I quote, "I never imagined that one day microcredit would give rise to its own breed of loan sharks. The allure of easy profits attracted some for-profit microfinance institutions to hold initial public offerings, including the largest Indian MFI, SKS Microfinance, which held an IPO in July 2010. In September 2010, Yunus criticized the same IPO. In a debate with SKS founder Vikram Akula during the Clinton Global Initiative meeting, he said, and I quote, "Microcredit is not about exciting people to make money off the poor. That's what you're doing." That's the wrong message completely. Now, the calculations of actual interest rates vary, but one estimate had put the average Grameen Bank rates at about 23%, which was comparable to the inflation rate. There was also the case of funds being directed to Europe for the purpose of cash diversion. Even though Grameen Bank was quickly cleared by the Norwegian government of all allegations surrounding misused or misappropriated funds in December 2010, it would be in March of 2011 that the Bangladeshi government launched launched a 3-month investigation of all of Grameen Bank's activities. This inquiry would go on to prevent Yunus from participating in the World Economic Forum. Before this, in January 2011, Yunus appeared in court for a defamation case filed by a local politician from a minor left-leaning party. The case was originally filed in 2007. And it complained about a statement that Yunus made to the AFP news agency. He said, and I quote, "Politicians in Bangladesh only work for power." There is no ideology here. At this hearing, Yunus was granted bail and exempted from having to make a personal appearance at subsequent hearings. However, these investigations fueled suspicion that many of these attacks might be politically motivated due to difficult relations between Sheikh Hasina and Yunus since early 2007, when Yunus created his own political party, an effort he dropped in May 2007. Hasina would go on to become the Prime Minister of Bangladesh a couple of years later, which could explain why the government started becoming hostile towards Yunus. Now, all of these controversies may showcase Yunus as a victim, but when you have so many queries raised against you, there has to be something that the public isn't aware of. Chapter 5, The Food Case and the Phone Case. On 27 January 2011, Yunus appeared in court over a food adulteration case filed by the Dhaka City Corporation Food Safety Court, which was accusing him of producing an adulterated yogurt. As per their findings, the fat content of this yogurt was below the legal minimum. This yogurt is produced by Grameen Danone, a social business joint venture between Grameen Bank and French MNC Danone. This venture aimed to provide opportunities to street vendors who sell the yogurt and to improve child nutrition with the nutrient-fortified product. According to Yunus's lawyer, the allegations were false and baseless. Since the claim didn't have to do with anything lethal, it didn't develop into a big issue for Yunus. However, in an investigation by a 2012 independent public commission examining Grameen Bank, it was asserted that Yunus misrepresented his authority and abused his powers during his tenure in management. The report established that legal challenges exist for authority of the Grameen Bank to have acted as guarantor and to have forwarded credit to independent private enterprises during Yunus's tenure. The report raised specific questions relating to multiple issues. The first was the establishment and financing of Grameenphone, which is a for-profit telecommunications entity initially established as a trust for the Grameen Bank borrowers together with Norwegian majority state-owned multinational Telenor. As one would expect, the whole thing was orchestrated by Yunus. The second issue was the simultaneous management and operational financing of private enterprises established by Yunus, who was utilizing the resources of Grameen Bank for the same. The commission also examined the legal status of Grameen Bank and concluded that it was de jure public, meaning government entity, of which incompetent oversight by the state and potentially unwitting misrepresentation by Yunus in the past resulted in the popular perception of the private ownership. The commission report referred to obstruction of commission investigations by current Grameen Bank management, representatives of Telenor, the government of Bangladesh, and by partisans of Yunus. Full implications of the report are thus far not closely examined in either state-controlled elements of Bangladeshi media or by pro-Yunus press releases, where these implicate Yunus as at least an accessory to corruption at the nexus of the Bangladeshi public commercial establishment in collusion with other parties. Chapter 6, Endless Trials. Yunus has gone on to face 174 lawsuits in Bangladesh, 172 of which were civil cases, because the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina retained power following the election in 2014. It comes as no surprise that Yunus and Hasina did not get along with each other. This was because Yunus has been a longtime critic of Hasina and has never missed out on opportunities to question her methods. The accusations he made against Hasina for manipulating the World Bank did damage the Prime Minister's reputation, and she made sure to return the favor. Allegations against Yunus included labor law violations, corruption, and money laundering, all of which he alleged were politically motivated. Hasina would not let him breathe, as she launched a series of trials against Yunus. She was the one who put Yunus on trial in 2010, and she was the one who ultimately removed him from Grameen Bank, citing his age as the primary reason. In 2013, Yunus was tried a second time because he had supposedly received earnings without the necessary government permission, including his Nobel Peace Prize earnings and royalties from his book sales. This series of trials against Yunus puzzled figures worldwide, from the 8.3 million underprivileged women served by Grameen Bank to the US President Barack Obama. He also found support in journalist Vikas Bajaj, who wrote the following on 7 November 2013. The government of Bangladesh has played its trump card in its long-running campaign against Grameen Bank and its founder Muhammad Yunus. Last week, legislators passed a law that effectively nationalizes the bank, which pioneered the idea of making small loans to poor women by wresting control of it from the 8.4 million rural women that own a majority of its shares. On 1st January 2024, a court in Bangladesh sentenced Yunus to a 6-month prison term, along with 3 employees from Grameen Telecom for labor law violations. There were also reports of embezzlement of around $2 million. However, the court granted bail pending appeals. Later on, Amnesty International declared Yunus's conviction a blatant abuse of the justice system. The conviction was overturned on 7th August 2024 following an appeal. Chapter 7 Conclusion. Now, with everything that has been said and done, the bottom line is that Yunus is currently leading Bangladesh's interim government, while Sheikh Hasina is currently in hiding. The drama and shock motivating the protests of the 2024 Bangladesh quota reform movement will need to be studied separately to understand its true story and implications, but it does prove that Hasina was not the outstanding candidate she had claimed to be all this while. It also brought a lot of light on Yunus's past criticisms of the disgraced prime minister, who is believed to be currently in hiding in India, although there are no official reports confirming her exact location. Having said that, it is important to note that Yunus is a Nobel laureate and his strong background in economics will prove to be an asset for his country. Sure, he may have had a lot of trials and accusations levied against him, but it can also be assumed that the whole thing was nothing more than a political war. There is no doubt that there are some serious findings in the middle of the huge mess left behind by Hasina, but it is hard to know what actually goes on behind closed doors, especially in the government. Is Yunus as clean as he claims to be? Probably not, but that's not the point because from the looks of it, he does seem to have value, and that is exactly what Bangladesh needs right now. Will his appointment prove to be right move in the long run? Only time will be able to tell us that. For now, what we can do is see what kinds of policies he will try to execute and how he is going to leverage his current position to take Bangladesh ahead. If you like today's topic, then please like, share, and subscribe so that I can continue to make more videos. Let me know in the comments if you'd like me to cover something you find interesting. Okay then, I'll see you in the next one.